Welcome to this Java Break with BASIS. My name is Nico Spence. I'm the Chairman and CEO of BASIS International. And today's topic is BASIS Support Group's Roadmap to Success. Let me explain. Our agenda is going to cover the following topics. We're going to set the scene, explain what I meant by BASIS Support Group's Roadmap to Success. We'll discuss the roadmap. We'll talk about the benefits of moving. And then we'll look at the step-by-step guide down this roadmap. So let's first set the scene. Does this or do any of these things apply to you? Do you have a monolithic Pro 5 deployment limping along as new users are added and placing more and more strain on your single tier server? Are you using Windows Map Drive technology as your solution to multi-user access? Are you struggling with universal access control as new Windows 8 clients are added to your network? Are you tempted by the benefits of a multi-tier deployment with items such as load-balanced application servers or high-availability database servers? Well, BASIS Support Group's recommendations are that you should consider the BASIS DBMS and the zero deployment options that we have at BASIS. There are 2 or 3 logical steps to success. Now, those steps may at first seem daunting. It may be a bit like this snail's eye view of clambering up that snow-covered mountain. Instead, it should really look a bit like this. A nice gentle summit over some rolling green hills. Let's get started. So what are those 2 or 3 steps to fixing these issues? 1 is to implement a network layer. And you do that either if you decide to stay with Pro 5 or Visual Pro 5 interpreters, or B, if you want to take advantage of multi-tier deployment and start separating out the interpreter and database layers. And then secondly, you would switch to the BASIS Database Management System to take advantage of all the new feature and function that it has to offer you. And then finally, you have the choice to switch to zero deployment thin clients and alleviate many of those issues that we outlined at the start of today's session. But this is a step-by-step approach with easy, simple steps to take. And throughout all of this, be aware that there's no data conversion required at all when you move across the BASIS DBMS, even though it's going to be under control of BBJ services rather than either under control of the operating system with simple Pro 5 single-tier architecture or with the Pro 5 data server structure. So this is what our decision tree looks like. Up here we'll be asking the question, do you wish to go to multi-tier or remain on Pro 5 Visual Pro 5? The answer is yes. We suggest introducing a network layer, the Pro 5 data server, as the simplistic way of ensuring that your application continues to perform as you might expect. Once you're satisfied with that, we suggest you switch across to the BASIS DBMS by merely taking advantage of the BBJ Pro 5 data service functionality built into BBJ services. And you can do that by merely changing the port number. And then you can decide whether you wish to switch the interpreters. If the answer is yes, your choices are to stay single tier or go multi-tier. And we'll outline the benefits of going multi-tier. And if not, if you wish to stay single tier, we'll outline the pros and cons. If, however, up here you've decided that you don't wish to either be multi-tier or remain on Pro 5 Visual Pro 5, then you're immediately ready to go to BBJ. And we're going to discuss the pros and cons of going multi-tier or single tier. So let's discuss some of the benefits then of moving to the BASIS DBMS. There are more file types available to you. So if you've been struggling with running out of key segments or keys, the X-keyed file type is your simplest upgrade. There are no key or key segment limits. And of course, you can access this from your Pro 5 and Visual Pro 5 interpreters. Similarly, the V-keyed file type. If you're storing huge amounts of data, many of which are not occupying the full record space that you're allocating, you can go to variable length records. V-keyed has all the functionality of X-keyed files with the additional capability of variable length records as well as named keys. Or you can start introducing a fully relational file type, the ESQL, exclusive SQL file type, to your application. Another benefit of the BASIS DBMS is the access to stored procedures, triggers, data replication, and data change auditing, and an increased security. Let's have a look at some of those. So firstly, SPROCs, or stored procedures. Those are either Pro 5 or BBJ programs stored in a database. Now, of course, the Pro5 programs, when executed from the database, will be automatically converted into BBJ tokens. They can be executed from standard SQL statements, which means that any third-party application or BBJ application can take advantage of a stored procedure. The stored procedure can perform complex processing and calculations, returning a result set to any program with an SQL connection to the database. So, for example, you could embed read record and write record type syntax into your stored procedure. Some of the other benefits from stored procedure is efficient reuse of existing code and libraries. So you can use the same piece of code that might be called from your Pro5 or Visual Pro5 or BBJ app and embed that into a stored procedure. Much easier to then maintain, lower development costs, and easy to integrate into new or third-party applications, giving you improved application reliability and allowing you to separate the business logic from the application. Let's look at triggers. These are again Pro5 or BBJ programs that are automatically executed in response to file access. So the majority of the code can be Pro5 logic. You do need some BBJ syntax in that program. The response could be to reads, writes, removes, opens, closes, and erases. There are 3 types: before, after, and instead of. Another great feature would be database replication. Data replication can either happen at the database level or at the file and directory level. It replicates specific files or directories from one location to another location. It could be on the same machine, on one or more machines on your local network, or one or more cloud machines, so it could be on a wide area network. The benefits are that you can take advantage of disaster recovery. You can have live backups, simultaneous real-time copies of your data. And that, of course, can be used to offload resource-intensive reporting to another server, thereby lightening the load on your production server and freeing up resource for your production application while still giving the power to those ad hoc reporting tasks. We also have automatic data change auditing, which will automatically record any changes to an ESQL file type of any data that's modified or deleted. And then lastly, we have security benefits. We've added the functionality to have standard and object level permissions. You can have limited user permissions at the database level, read only, read write, and or allow all. These are easy to set up and manage from the Enterprise Manager. And you can create roles, name groups of users with assigned permissions. So the BASIS support group's recommendations is to consider using the BASIS DBMS, not only for those benefits I've just outlined, but it's faster than the Pro5 data server. BBJ is the latest, most modern version of Pro5 and or Visual Pro5. So you'll get all the benefits you've had with Pro5 and or Visual Pro5 if you move across to the BBJ equivalent of BBX. And in BBJ 13.10, you will see a 12-fold faster concurrent read access speed improvement over Pro5. So very significant. So if you're running Visual Pro5 deployments, and you probably are already using Pro5 data server, your switch is really simple. All you have to do is make a port number change to move across from the Pro5 data server to the BBJ DBMS data server under BBJ's control. The other option that will really alleviate your deployment issues is zero deployment via our thin client. It's a much smarter way to access the application on the server. And you can take advantage of an industry standard Java Web Start. The cost benefits are that there's no terminal emulation costs. You run the thin client on the desktop, which then connects into the server. And a single user license can support multiple sessions in either CUI or GUI on the desktop. So no more consumption of multiple sessions just to be able to have more than one task running through terminal emulation code. It's much more efficient, and we deliver it via the built-in Jetty web server. So deployment is a snap. So here's your decision time. Do you want to fix these issues? If your answer is no, well, we'll wish you adieu, and you can view this session when you are ready. But I'm hoping that you've attended today's session because you've seen some benefits. With yes as your answer, let's get started. So the first thing we need to decide is, do we want to stay single tier or go multi-tier? And are we ready to go to BBJ interpreters, or do we wish to remain on Pro5 and Visual Pro5 interpreters? If the answer is no and you're ready to go fully fledged to BBJ and you're happy to stay in single tier, you are ready for BBJ straight away. If not, we suggest you introduce the network layer via Pro5 data server. Now, we're not introducing any fantastically new technology. We're just ensuring that you understand how the network layer works. Assuming that we're remaining on Pro 5 and Visual Pro 5, we'll set up our data access via the Pro 5 data server, introducing the network layer and creating what is essentially two-tier deployment. We're going to move the database management load onto a data server, which could be running on the same physical box, but we're going to access our data via the Pro 5 data server. We need to set the setops byte 4 to 20, and our code syntax for opening files directly via the data server syntax would be to insert the leading server designation and the port number, and then the path to the file name. Or we can allow the prefix in the config.bbx to locate the file in the database machine by setting the prefix before the path to the file name, and then merely opening up the file name. Port 1100 is the default port for the Pro 5 data server. Our suggestion is to use one data server prefix for data on the interpreter. So at the interpreter layer, we're only doing one connection to the data server, and then use canonical paths to the data directories in the Pro 5 data server prefix. And we can stick that in the config.bbx for the Pro 5 data server. So the Pro 5 interpreter prefix is a really simple one that designates the server and the port number. And then in your Pro 5 data server prefix, which will be in the Pro 5 data server config.bbx, we set the same prefix information that we probably contain in our existing config.bbx. One of the considerations as you move across is you'll be introducing the network layer, and you'll need to be cognizant of the latency that we're going to introduce perhaps to batch jobs. And so you can examine the performance of those batch jobs by enabling set trace and evaluating those results in the performance analyzer to see how you might optimize that code. Most often this code hasn't been touched for many a year, and there are significant opportunities to modify the code to optimize its performance. Failing which, you can consider running the batch code in BBJ directly on the server without utilizing the data server layer, the network layer. So let's look at our step 2. We've decided to remain on Pro 5, Visual Pro 5. We've introduced the network layer, Pro 5 data server. Now all we need to do, as we've established that our application is performing as we might expect, is to switch to the BASIS DBMS, to switch to using the BBJ Pro 5 data server. And that's a simple change to the port number. But let's have a look at a demonstration. We're going to take a typical Pro 5 application. In this case, we'll use our Addon V6 character-based Pro 5 application. We'll introduce the network layer by introducing Pro 5 data server syntax, and then we'll change the database layer to the BASIS DBMS by utilizing the BBJ P5 DS server. And then just to confirm that it functions as we might expect in our demonstration, we'll run replication and see that the data indeed is being controlled under BBJ services. So let me hand over to Amir Child, who will actually take us through a demonstration of our Pro 5 application being switched across with a network layer and then finally moved across to the BASIS DBMS. Over to you, Amir.
First, here we are on a Linux machine. We're going to go ahead and execute Pro 5. cd to our Pro 5 directory. Execute Pro 5. There we have it. Now we'll go ahead and cd back to our GUI application, Addon, and execute Addon. Go ahead and log in. And we'll go to Accounts Payable, Maintenance menu, and we'll look at the vendor maintenance file and exit out of the application. Now that we've exited the application, we're going to go ahead and modify our config.bbx, but in this case it's going to be a config.aon. I'm going to move to my root terminal, and first thing you'll notice is in our prefix you can see that we were pointing to the local file system. Comment out that prefix and turn on our data server syntax in the next prefix. Where did our prefix go? So let's take a look at the Pro 5 data server config.bbx. Here's where our prefix ended up. And as you can see, since we are now using database syntax on the config.aon, all we need to do is put our prefix in the config.bbx in order for the data to be searched through the server. Now we'll go ahead and kick off Addon and log in again. And again, we'll go to Accounts Payable, Maintenance, Vendor Maintenance, and load that record. Now that we've shown it access via the local file system and the Pro 5 data server, now let's move it to the BASIS DBMS. So to do that, we're going to go into Eclipse, and we're going to access our BASIS Enterprise Manager. Here you can see my demo machine. We're going to go ahead and connect to it, log in. Now that we're logged in, we can go to servers in the BBJ Pro5 data server. Couple things to note when you're under the Pro5 data server. It runs on port 2100. However, we could simply change this to port 1100 and we wouldn't have to touch our config.bbx. But in this case, we're going to leave it at port 2100 and modify our config.aon. Additionally, you want to make sure you set your prefix, as you can see here. So we'll close out servers, save our changes. Now we'll go to our root terminal, edit our config.aon again. Here we are at the prefix line, and all we need to do is simply change this to 2100, save the file, exit Addon, we'll restart Addon, and we'll go to Accounts Payable Maintenance menu, and again, Vendor Maintenance. So we're going to pull up our first record for Paramount Industries. Here you can see it's using a phone number of 505-345-5232. So now we're going to go back to our Enterprise Manager in Eclipse. I already have a replication job set up to access the replicated data. So now we're going to go to Databases. And here we have our add-on demo data that's pointing to our Addon V6 standard directory. We're going to open that database. Now that our database is open, there's a couple things to know. You'll see that we're pointing to our read-only version of our replicated data, adata.replicated. Next, we're going to go ahead and execute a SQL query against that replicated data. Click on the SQL tab, then we'll execute our query editor, and we'll do a select. We'll do a select star from APM01. Let's go ahead and run that query. And here we have Paramount Industries. And you can see our current phone number matches what we saw on the screen of 505-345-5232. Let's go ahead and change that. Go back to our application. Go to name and address. We'll change it to 712-222-5252. Go ahead and save that record. Now we'll run that SQL query again to see if our data has been updated yet. And there we are, Paramount Industries. And our new phone number has been updated.
Thanks, Amir. Now let's do the same thing, but this time with the Visual Pro 5 application. Now we're going to use Addon version 7, which is the Visual Pro 5 app. We'll again introduce the network layer with Pro 5 Data Server. And in most cases, of course, if you're running a Visual Pro 5 app, you're probably using the Pro 5 Data Server already. And then we'll change the database layer to the BASIS DBMS by introducing the BBJ P5 DS server. And we'll confirm that again by running replication. Let me hand it back to Amir.
We're going to go ahead and log into Addon. Now we're going to access Accounts Payable. We're going to go to Maintenance and then Vendor Maintenance. Click OK. And now we're going to click on Name and Address. Now here's all the information for Paramount Industries. Click Cancel, and we'll exit Addon. Now we're going to add the network layer to our GUI application. So first off, we need to edit our config.bbx, or in this case, it's our Aon standard.cfg. So we'll open up Notepad, and you'll see that our prefix is currently pointing to the local file system for both the data as well as the application. We're going to comment out that prefix. We're going to uncomment our Pro5 data server prefix. Save the file. So next we need to go to our config.bbx for the Pro5 data server. As you can see in its prefix, we've added all of our Aon data and applications. Minimize. We'll go ahead and run our GUI application again. Log in. And we'll go to Accounts Payable, Maintenance, Vendor Maintenance. Click OK, and we'll pull up the record for Paramount Industries. So now we're going to go ahead and move from the Pro5 data server to the BBJ DBMS. So we'll exit the application altogether. Here we are in our Enterprise Manager for Eclipse, so we're going to connect to our Linux machine. We'll go to Servers. We'll open up our Pro5 data server. Now you'll notice that it's running on port 2100. We have the option to change that port to 1100, restart BBJ services, and then we would not have to change our config file. In this case, we are going to leave it at 2100 and change our config file. Additionally, you want to make sure you update your prefix. So our Addon 7 data has been copied up via SCP to user local Addon V7 data into the A data directory. So we click OK. We'll save our changes. So now we need to go ahead and update our config.bbx for our GUI program and point it to our remote system. So we previously had localhost for the local data server. Now we're going to comment out that prefix, and we're going to enable our prefix that is pointing to our Linux machine. We're going to save our config file, minimize. Now that we've updated our GUI application to the point to the BASIS DBMS, let's go ahead and execute it again. Go ahead and log in. Now let's access accounts payable. Now we'll go to maintenance and vendor maintenance. We'll open up our first record, Paramount Industries, and we'll take a look at the contact information. As you can see, the telephone number is 714-830-9233. Now we're going to go back to our Eclipse Enterprise Manager. I've already set up a replication job to replicate my Addon 7 data. Let's go to Databases, and we're going to go to our Addon version 7 database. Now that our database is up, we can see that we are pointing to our Addon version 7 data and our adata.replicated read-only database. Now we're going to go to the SQL tab, execute the query editor, and now we're going to do a select star from our APM vend mass file. We'll execute the query. And here we have Paramount Industries. And we can see the phone number is 714-830-9233. Now we're going to go back to our vendor master in our GUI application, and we're going to update the phone number. We're going to change it to 505-345-5232. Click OK. The record's been saved. Go back to our Enterprise Manager. Now we'll execute the query again. And we can see our record Paramount Industries, and our number has been updated.
Thanks, Amir. BASIS Tech Support recommendation when you wish to either remain on Pro5 and Visual Pro5 but start using the BASIS DBMS, or you wish to go multi-tier architecture, is to first introduce the network layer with Pro5 data server, and then switch across to the BASIS DBMS, and then by simply changing the port number. Then finally you're faced with the choice of whether you wish to switch to the BBJ interpreters. If you decide not to, you can run your batch utilities in BBJ directly against the data server with no data server syntax, or you can use the xcall syntax from within Pro5 and Visual Pro5 to call some BBJ utilities to get additional functionality with your application. If you've decided to abandon Pro5 and Visual Pro5 interpreters and move to the latest version of BBX interpreters BBJ, we then advise you to take the following steps. Firstly, there's a BASIS Pro5 utility called _keyword, which is a search and replace utility to find reserved words that we've introduced to BBJ. So it scans for those reserved keywords and appends an underscore to the variable names. If they're located in a string variable, ones that end in a $, the underscore precedes the $ to preserve the variable type. Let's imagine you have some syntax which used the word case as a variable and assigned a value of 15. That becomes case underscore equals 15. Similarly with a string variable. We then suggest you recompile your programs using the BBJ compiler. That'll turn your ASCII text files into tokenized BBJ program files, and it'll perform a more stringent parsing of the code. For example, it will catch multiple identical labels, which the Pro5 interpreter wouldn't have caught. If you decide to stay with single-tier architecture, let's have a review of some of the pros and cons. It's identical really to Pro5 in its simplicity. It does not require any network connection, so everything runs on the server. You can still use your terminal emulation products to connect to the server and to the application. Easy to install on a single machine. You just need to ensure that you have sufficient CPU memory and storage for a Java virtual machine. It's however much less robust, far less scalable because you're running on a single server, and you therefore have a single point of failure. With three-tier architecture, you have the opportunity to separate out the presentation layer, the application or business logic layer, and the database layers. It can give you improved performance in your medium to high volume environments. It is, however, a more complex setup and requires a different approach to the maintenance. The database layer will have a performance impact, not on your interactive user applications, but more generally on your batch applications. However, you can still run those batch processes on the database layer without the network involved. Another major benefit is the room to grow, the scalability of the solution with multi-tier architecture. You have the ability to have a high availability cluster for your database server, giving you instant failback recovery capabilities. You can add additional application servers, which can be load balanced. As each new user logs into the cluster, they'll be allocated to the server that has the least amount of resource consumed. You're able to do this with inexpensive servers, and it's far more robust due to the redundancies of multiple server deployment. In the single-tier deployment environment with either Pro5 or BBJ GUI, we're still running with dumb terminals and terminal emulation, and everything's running on the single box. And you can able to take advantage of all the functionality of both BBJ and the BBJ BASIS DBMS. Once you introduce, say, two-tier deployments with your thin clients as your front-end tier, your presentation layer, you can still have the single tier at the back end of the database and the applications on the same server, but now you can extend and take advantage of BBJ's zero deployment choices with the Java Web Start thin client. And then if you go to fully fledged multi-tier deployment and you add app servers and a second high availability cluster, you have the full scalability and flexibility of a modern deployment choice. So what are the benefits of moving to BBJ? You have the ability to take advantage of Barista, the rapid application development environment. And of course, BBJ is perfect for any integration task to third-party utilities, the ability to offer and consume web services, to do scheduling, replacing the need to be reliant on an operating system scheduling feature. And of course, you can create mobile applications with the browser user interface environment. It opens up the door to the use of extensive Java libraries, many of which are free, the POI interface for Microsoft Office data formats, the iText interface for PDF file manipulation, and the JFree chart for GUI charting, just to name a few. Some considerations when you're moving from Visual Pro 5 GUI to BBJ GUI is that we changed the format of the resource file from a binary resource file to an ASCII resource file. But we've made it easy for you to make the conversion by giving you a utility which you can invoke at the command line with wildcards. So you can either do a search and replace through your code to change BRC suffixes to ARC and then do the conversion, or in doing the conversion you can convert ARCs and retain the BRC suffix, thereby not needing to change any of your application code. Some other considerations that you need to bear in mind is Visual Pro 5. If you've deployed it as a fat client and you compare that to the BBJ thin client, you need to consider that the BBJ thin client is similar to a Citrix or Windows Terminal Services deployment, whereby the server client paradigm has changed. The BBJ thin client S-calls are executed on the server, not on the client. So if you have code that's written to expect to execute system calls on the fat client, you need to be aware that when you're running BBJ, those will be executing on the server. In conclusion, Tech Support's roadmap to success incorporates 3 logical steps. Each adds power, flexibility, and scalability. And having arrived at BBJ either through just the database or with interpreters, you receive the ever-growing feature set of the modern language and database. In conclusion, we remind you that there is a vast library of Java breaks that will cover several of the topics that we touched on very briefly today, including converting to BBJ from earlier versions of BASIS products. So in summary, we've looked at setting the scene of the kinds of challenges that are presented to the BASIS tech support team, and we've shared with you their roadmap to success, described the benefits of moving to the BASIS DBMS or to the BBJ interpreters, and we've looked at the step-by-step procedure that we would follow. Our next event is going to be the Tech Condensed in Canada, in Montreal on Monday, November 18th, and in Toronto on Tuesday, November 19th. If you are planning to attend and you haven't already registered, go to the www.descore.com website to register. Let's take your questions.